They came for my road, not with guns, but with forged maps, midnight sabotage, and HOA lawyers in suits, so sharp you'd think they'd shave the hair off a peach just by walking by. You ever build something with your own hands, something that costs more than your last 3 cars put together, only to wake up and find out a bunch of suburban retirees want to steal it out from under you using nothing but paperwork and bad intentions? Buddy, buckle up, because this isn't just a driveway. It's a war zone, and apparently, I signed up to be the last man standing. It all started one of those mornings where the Colorado air is so clean it hurts your teeth, with a tinge of pine sap, and the sort of quiet that makes you realize how much noise you left behind in the city. I'd only been living on my 20 acres of hillside for a couple of weeks, trying to figure out what a slower pace even meant after spending 2 decades designing highways and drainage systems for the Texas DOT. You know what I didn't miss about city life? Commuting. But you know what followed me anyway? Bad roads. The first time I drove up to my new cabin, the so-called road was just a faded scar winding up the hill, more memory than path. Every morning, my poor truck would bottom out on a rock the size of a microwave, and by the end of that first week, my suspension was making noises only dogs could hear. So I did what any stubborn old engineer would do. I drew up plans for a driveway that'd make even the DOT boys jealous. Spent 3 months with a crew grading, pouring concrete, wrestling culverts, and by the time the last reflective stripe dried, I had a private highway, my own little slice of civilization in the woods. For a week, I was king of the mountain. I'd wake up, make my coffee, watch the sunrise creep over the ridge, and drive down that driveway like a parade marshal. That's about when the first letter showed up, thick envelope, official letterhead, the kind that screams audit or summons. Ridgepine Peaks Homeowners Association. At first, I figured it was junk mail. My place was a good 2 miles away from their matchy-matchy neighborhood, their planned community with garden gnome restrictions and enough rules to make your head spin. But no, it was addressed to me, telling me I owed them $100 for unauthorized use of community road infrastructure. I laughed, out loud. According to these folks, I'd been sneaking across their sacred HOA land. Funny, because the only things I'd seen out here were deer and pine cones. My driveway starts on my land, ends on my land, and the closest thing I share with the HOA is the weather. I tossed the letter, figured it was some kind of mix-up. But you know how life is. Get busy, forget to call, and 5 days later there's another envelope. This one with final warning in angry red font. Now I owe more, and apparently, I'm on the verge of enforcement action. Called the number, got some automated system that wanted to know if I'd seen any non-compliant holiday decorations. Gave up. But the real shock came one morning as I'm heading out, just humming along my brand new road, only to find a big white SUV blocking my exit. Guy steps out, built like a linebacker in a security vest, hand resting on his belt like he'd watched too many cop shows. "Sir, you are not authorized to use this road." I blinked. "Buddy, I built this road." Didn't faze him. He just kept repeating, "Access requires payment. You are non-compliant." That's when I realized this wasn't a clerical error. This was an old-school shakedown, HOA style. I went straight to the county office. Clerk pulls up a map, frowns, then swivels the monitor so I can see. Sure enough, according to a newly filed expansion map, my driveway is now in their jurisdiction. The red line on the screen wraps around my property like a python with boundary issues. And then, the real kicker, a signature on the filing, my own name, supposedly approving this nonsense. Thing is, I haven't written my name in cursive since the Clinton administration. So, I text the signature to my buddy Hal in Texas. Guy used to do document forensics for the state. 20 minutes later, he calls. "That's a trace job. Sloppy, too. Someone copied your signature off your driver's license." There it was. Not only were they making up maps, they forged my name to steal my road. Next thing you know, I come home to find a fresh plastic barrier at the bottom of my driveway. Keypad, private community road sign, the whole 9 yards. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. Filmed everything, called the sheriff, handed over my deed, the real plat, the HOA's fantasy map with its forged signature. Deputy looks it over, says he'll file a report, but this is probably a civil matter. Paperwork, not handcuffs. So I went to work with bolt cutters, made short work of their gate, filmed that too. HOA wasn't done. Next day, I get a hand-delivered notice, $368 for vandalism, threat of liens and lawsuits. But they still addressed me as resident, like I'd moved into their Stepford paradise. Hired a lawyer, Sylvia Grant, sharp as a tack and about as sympathetic to HOAs as a bulldozer. They're nuts, but we'll bury them, she said. They want two things: to create a paper trail claiming your land, and to provoke you so they can call you a threat. Well, too late for that. I'd already gone after their gate with bolt cutters. She smiled. Good, now we're on offense. Weeks go by, quiet except for HOA cars idling at the edge of my property and some guy in a Lexus taking photos like he's auditioning for TMZ. Then late one night, my trail cam catches two guys in high-vis vests, poking around my drainage outlet with a crowbar. By morning, they'd chipped the concrete, dumped gravel to slow me down, and left candy wrappers with the HOA Landscapers logo like some reverse Halloween. Sylvia's face turned to stone. That's sabotage. We added it to the lawsuit, brought in an engineer who estimated $12,000 in repairs. The case ballooned. I was suing the HOA for $2.3 million. Obstruction, harassment, fraud, property damage. Thought they'd back off. Nope, they countersued, claiming I was blocking community infrastructure. Sent me a photo with my road labeled Community Arterial. Trouble is, the timestamp was 3 weeks before my concrete was poured. They didn't even bother to Photoshop it right. The real twist? That surveyor who signed their expansion plat, Jeremy Cross, turned out to be a known scammer, license yanked for forging reports in Steamboat Springs. When Sylvia found his disciplinary record, I finally understood. This was bigger than me, bigger than my driveway. These folks were running a template scam, and I was just the unlucky guy who fought back. But it wasn't just lawyers and fake maps. This thing went physical. A few nights later, I heard scraping on the road at 2:30 a.m. Found two guys chiseling the edge of the pavement, another one standing watch by a truck with no plates. I caught them on camera, got their faces, their tire tracks, even a spray-painted neon X marking future demolition spots. Another sheriff's report. This time, the deputy took it seriously. That's felony damage, he said. Finally, someone else noticed. Then came Harris Brinkley, a landscaper who used to work for the HOA. Called me out of the blue, nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. They paid cash for gravel deliveries up your slope, off the books. There's more. Karen, the HOA president, wants your road as leverage to force assessments on everyone nearby. She's expanding the HOA by force. Harris even brought an affidavit. With a witness, the DA started looking real close. We commissioned a full-blown survey, LiDAR overlays, soil rights, every inch of land accounted for. Turns out the HOA's expansion had illegally claimed not just my driveway, but parts of 3 other properties. Plat's signatures were forged. We filed to suspend the HOA's expansion plat pending a criminal investigation. The judge, a former military lawyer with no patience for bull, granted an emergency order keeping the HOA and their contractors 100 yards from my land. One board member even quit and handed over emails showing the HOA president was digitally altering maps to nudge boundaries in her favor. And then karma showed up in a badge and handcuffs. Karen got arrested for felony fraud, document tampering, conspiracy, and criminal mischief right outside a nail salon. The news spread fast. Reddit had a field day. Still, the HOA tried to countersue me for emotional distress. I uploaded my drone footage, court orders, and emails for every neighbor to see. People started coming out of the woodwork. Turns out I wasn't the only one being targeted by this scam. One guy had been paying access fees for years just to avoid trouble. When the dust settled, the county voided the fake expansion plat. HOA's funds were frozen, and every board member resigned. My road was finally, formally recognized as private infrastructure out of reach of any HOA dreams. But I wasn't done. I pushed for a new county law, call it the Travis Road Act. Any private road, built on deeded land, properly surveyed and approved, could never fall under HOA jurisdiction. Took months, but it passed. My headache, my lawsuit, became protection for every little guy out here building a life in the woods. Here's what I learned, though. It's easy to think justice is a finish line, that once you win, things go back to normal. Truth is, the battles you fight for what's yours, especially against people who wield paperwork and petty power like weapons, those battles leave marks. They force you to see the world with fewer illusions. But they also show you that most bullies count on you giving up, not on you fighting back until the system blinks first. And maybe, just maybe, you realize that some things are worth fighting for. Not because you won the war, but because you know that if you don't, someone else will be next. Now, I drive my road every morning, coffee in hand, sometimes laughing, sometimes shaking my head. There's a new sign at the end, private road. Built, owned, and defended by C. Travis. Trespassers will be sued. Cost me 6 figures, a pile of gray hair, and more than a few nights staring at the ceiling. But it's mine, and that's not for sale. So here's my question for you. Where's the line between community and control, between rules and rights? When does neighborly turn into nasty? And who gets to decide when enough is enough? Ever had a fight for what's yours against the folks who say they're just following the rules? Drop your story below. I'm all ears, and I bet I'm not the only one.